In 1993, FSOL announced that they were no longer a band but now a broadcast system. Instead of just creating music, they were creating ultramedia, and among the many things they listed as being in the pipeline to release, or at least research, alongside films, video games and AI, were books. Since then, only a couple of books came out, a short booklet of artwork in 2014, and the limited edition bonus book with Dead Cities in 1996. However, their first proper standalone full-length book came out in 2015, and it came with a bonus album. And that's what we'll be looking at this week on Earthbeat Visions, a history of the future sound of London. The most important moments in a life, and life in moments. Release date, 9th of November 2015. Sometimes a release is teased for months and even years, and other times something comes along out of the blue. This book and CD set fell very much into the latter camp, although it was actually hinted at the previous year with a follow-up to Artworks being announced called Histories. Either way, it's fair to say nobody was expecting an 80-page A4 book with accompanying 11-track CD. Gaz casually dropped it in a conversation on Facebook a few days before release, describing it as a rather sumptuous FSOL scrapbook of sorts, the most important moments of a life, compiled and collaged from the vaults of old pics, personal notebooks and cuttings of interesting curios and memorabilia, filling its 80-ish full-colour gloss colour pages, a feast for the eyes and a very interesting read to boot. It went on sale on Monday 9th November, although copies didn't start shipping until the following week. New t-shirts and test-pressing vinyl releases were also put on sale at the same time, as well as a limited number of signed copies of the book. They probably raked in a lot of cash that day. Copies came in a sealed polythene bag, accompanied by a plethora of postcards and stickers from throughout the band's history as an extra treat. They'd been popping the odd postcard in with the orders for years, but these packages were a wonderful little gift set. It's a hefty book with lots to read. As soon as it came, I sat down and spent the bulk of the day absorbed in it. Unlike Artworks 1, there's too much to do a proper page-by-page description here, but I'll give a brief description of what it covers and highlight new information discovered in its many pages. The cover features the same shot as the Artworks 1 booklet, which is still listed as Environment 6 cover on the inside. The title comes from an in-depth 1996 Mixmag interview with the band, which seems to be the source of the text on the cover. I'll link that down below because that's probably the most fascinating interview with the band ever done. It's really worth a read if you've not read it before. Strangely, the band name is in a fairly generic font, while the subtitle, A History of the Future Sound of London, is in Eurostyle extended. The herd killing, curves and EBV logos are also present on the cover. Inside, the style is very much collage, with each page featuring a bewildering number of scans, texts and images bodged together into a generous explosion of information. The accelerator spread includes different covers, excerpts from numerous interviews and reviews, chart placings, an equipment list, photographs and a flyer for Earthbeat 1992 London Central Recordings. Whatever that was. Papua New Guinea is represented by various cover images, a lot of reviews, a handwritten note accompanying Weatherall's remix, original tapes of Papua and Accelerator, screenshots of the music video and photos of the band at Maida Vale recording their first Peel session. Tales for Fortuna gets 4 pages, including both pages of the original press release announcing the album and the formation of EBV Records, then standing for Earthbeat Vision. Cascade has 2 pages, mostly of reviews and interviews, with Lifeforms getting a whole 9 pages, including 2 press releases. These are particularly fascinating as it's not often you get an idea of how the band were perceived and promoted back in the day, as opposed to retrospectively from the internet era. The final 3 pages of Lifeforms feature contemporary press about the band's first ISDN tour and the world's first ever internet download, providing a tracklist of 3D Headspace tour bootleg in the process. Paths only gets a single page, while ISDN gets 4, including a handwritten draft of a press release. 3 pages are given over to the 2 Far Out Son of Lung singles plus video. Remarkably, Semtex gets a page to itself, while Dead Cities gets 4, including numerous pictures of work-in-progress tracklists, and what looks like a plan of how the album got its final mixdown. My Kingdom gets 2 pages dedicated to DJ responses and technical requirements for its music video. Super nerdy perhaps, but how many bands share this kind of information? We Have Explosive only has a single page of images, but the Virgin era comes to a close with 5 whole pages documenting the essential festival transmission. Just about every page features something intriguing to look at, with the reviews and interviews being particularly insightful. The second half of the book, dedicated to the 21st century, is unsurprisingly lighter in reading matter, with generally less press coverage, but features the most interesting images. The first 2 pages alone, titled The Archives, show more than 100 DATs, flash drives and floppy disks from the countless boxes of material. That these represent only a tiny percentage of the material sat in Brian's basement gives a good idea of how the From the Archives series keeps giving. While a lot of these have relatively straightforward names, June 1995, Simon Snuff, there are loads of intriguing things there too. The entire My Kingdom single can be traced over the space of a DAT. Cheesy Organ, Pish from summer 1997 is amusing, and Sitar from August suggests they started working on directly psychedelic stuff far earlier than we had initially imagined. Is Glass Raga Glacier? Was Exploded Funk really recorded in April 96 as explosive slap bass? Jackknife Lee's remix of the Mellow Hippo Disco Show was delivered when the track was still called Yo-Yo. Whatever happened to Orb ripoff? There's stuff to keep you looking at these for hours. Extensive artwork and track lists for the From the Archives and Environments albums follows, with a few interesting snippets in between. The phrase, "my face forms between 10 and 12 always sounds interesting to me. Side projects account for the final part of the book, with the Isness getting a page of press and a lot of unused Mellow Hippo lyrics, Alice in Ultraland just about stretching to a page of press, and some images for the Peppermint Tree. After a couple of pages dedicated to the monstrous psychedelic bubble CDs, it's back to the early years, and there's what looks like a rough track listing for Eurotechno, a lot of glowing stack of humanoid press, an early track list for Global which poses more questions than it answers, and 3 pages of covers and reviews for the Passion Music era, including release dates for most of the 12 inches. Then there are 5 pages dedicated to FSOL digital projects, and just when you think it's over, there are another 3 pages of random images filled with more curios. Here's a list of just some of the more intriguing things. A Lifeforms test pressing from December 1993 titled Lifeform V1. Yage soundtrack from the motion picture Disc 1 featuring With the Cows We Travelled Again, produced by FSOL on Frog Dog recordings, published by Dog the Wolf Music. A VHS of Moving Without Shape, a film by Bin Dog, featuring music by Amorphous Androgynous, Park, Gary Lucas, Vangelis and Z-Box. A CDR of Work in Progress tracks by Gaz, including A Glitch in Cellular Memory, Hollow Earth and Nostradamus. A letter from Gaz stating he takes full responsibility for use of an oxygen tank and mask at the 2001 Elbow Room's DJ slot. A new humanoid graphic. And for the first time, photographs of Graham and Keith from Freedom Management. Martin appears way back on the first accelerator page. Leon Marr, Dan Pemberton, Max Richter, and of course Buggy G Ribhead. Plus a ton more photos and press cuttings. The book is sadly out of print and goes for a lot of money on the second-hand market, but there is talk of a reprint possibly expanded to include everything that's come along in the decades since. Fingers crossed for that. Not content to provide us with such an excellent book on its own terms, FSOL also gave us a new album. Sort of. For a lot of fans, many of these tracks would have been new, and in some cases they are updated. At 11 tracks and 39 minutes, the 2015 version is by far the group's shortest album, and with some tracks cut down from their earlier released versions, this does feel a teensy bit stingy. But it's a great collection that puts some of the band's best obscure tracks, I Turn to Face the Sun in particular, in a more suitable setting, with a handful of new recordings too. Kaz spoke about his excitement at getting the book and the music on Facebook. Brother Brian popped over with a veritable goodie bag of our releases the other day, mostly vinyl. Nice to finally see and hear it all on wax. We were though most excited to see, fresh off the printer's press, a rather sumptuous FSOL scrapbook of sorts, the most important moments of a life that Brian's been busy compiling for months, which has had us both rooting through our vaults of old pics, personal notebooks and cuttings for interesting curios and memorabilia to fill its 80-ish colour pages. I couldn't stop thumbing its pages. It's a feast for the eyes and a fascinating portal into the FSOL metaverse. It was also my chance to finally hear what he's done with the album Life in Moments that accompanies it, and more importantly the tracks and MIDI files I contributed towards it. What can I say, our kid is a magician. Tweak the mixes hardly does it justice. melodic lines now triggering a plethora of synth and a cathedral of otherworldly sound. My mind's beginning to boggle. A new FSOL album is beginning to be very much an exciting proposition again. Hashtag we can do this, we always knew this. There's a lot to unpack there, so let's take it step by step. First of all, yes, it's Gaz being enthusiastic about FSOL once more. At this point he was talking about FSOL way more than Amorphous, and that was lovely. I keep saying this, I know. Possibly of most interest, it gives an idea into the pair's working process at the time. There have been rumours since the launch of FSOL Digital that Brian and Gaz run FSOL and Amorphous largely as solo projects, and there is clearly a divide in the amount of attention they give to each of the projects, but the fact that Gaz provided not only MIDI files around which Brian worked new tracks, but actual full pieces themselves to have their final mixes put together by Brian for the album, shows that in 2015 this was definitely not the case. That said, it's also obvious that the final album was pieced together by Brian. Perhaps it could be read that regardless of who does what for each track, Brian's in charge of the final product with FSOL and Gaz with Amorphous, which is what a fair few people assumed. The final thing to take in is that last bit, not the weird hashtag, whatever that is, the last proper sentence. Now, a year before this, Gaz was talking about Environment 5 being a proper new FSOL album, and yet here he's talking about a new FSOL album being an exciting proposition. What does this actually mean? It's maybe an album of Brian and Gaz working together, possibly in the studio at the same time, completing every aspect of the record as a duo, including the final mixdown, but it's hard to say. The entire concept of the Environment series and how it's developed had muddied the waters so much in terms of there being a new album again, it's all become a bit of a headache to think about it. Maybe that was intentional. A lot of the material that Gaz had provided for the album he'd actually sent over to Brian initially with the mind of it perhaps being Amorphous material, and was surprised to get it back as FSOL tracks in more electronic settings. However, it was discussed that these tracks could still go on to be Amorphous tracks too, continuing the pattern that had begun with the Cartel and the Environment series, with the two projects running side by side, often sharing ideas. Videos for I Turn to Face the Sun and the closing part of Taken Leave of All Senses were added to YouTube to promote the release. In terms of tracks, the album includes digital-only bonus tracks from Artworks 1, Archived 8 and From the Archives Volume 7, mostly in their original form but in the case of Bring, radically updated. There are also 5 new pieces, all of which feel like a continuation of the guitar, piano, drum sound of Environment 5. Indeed, while expecting a consistent atmosphere from such an album would be perhaps too optimistic, these tracks feel like they could run close to Amorphous in terms of their band sound. There's still very little in the way of a sound world being created here. That said, the record does play without any gaps from start to finish, which is also welcome. This isn't a big deal, as it's an album of offcuts and obscurities, and it's also consistently excellent. The cover features a photo of Dollis Hill Station, first seen in the Dead Cities bonus book, giving the kind of saturated colour wash the Archived 8 booklet featured. The band name is taken from the Essential Festival press release, as seen in the book. The back cover features a sunset shot, track list and credits written in the Environment 5, Archived 8, almost Euro-style expanded font, and the now familiar EBV, Herd Killing and Curves logos. Interestingly, Gaz comes first in the writing credits, almost unheard of outside of Amorphous, and a mastering credit is given. It was with a certain amount of joy that this long out of print album, extremely difficult to find, was added to the band's Bandcamp on its launch in 2020, making the music easily available for those who never managed to get a copy of the book in 2015. After a box of 50 copies of the album was found in Brian's basement and sold out almost immediately from Bandcamp, Life in Moments was chosen to be a Record Store Day reissue, an expanded LP version turning up on Record Store Day 2023 and a further expanded CD version a few weeks later. I'll discuss those in a few videos time when I get to the year. Taken Leave of All Senses. Taken Leave of All Senses opens with an ambiguous sounding piano melody, overlaid with an Eastern sounding harp. Gradually a slow plodding drum march comes in a different time signature, adding a wonderfully strange overlapping effect. As synths are added, things get into what might be considered traditional FSOL territory before the melodic elements cut out and chugging guitar chords unexpectedly appear. Then it's back to the main melodies again, with synth arpeggios adding a more emotive feel. As with much of this series material, there are none of the band's classic weird samples, the focus instead being on live instruments and synths, with notes and sounds from them layered up to create a dense, complex piece. The final 90 seconds moves into more overtly electronic territory with a light glitchy beat and rich synth pads, an evocative and emotional sounding opener. Bring, Life in Moments version. I don't have any hard and fast rules about how I present different versions of tracks in this series. There are different edits under the same title, usually being discussed together, but room for exceptions. And Bring is possibly the biggest exception. Released as a short, skeletal piece for piano and drum machine on the archived 8 bonus EP, Bring was updated so radically for its inclusion on Life in Moments that it's effectively a different track entirely. This version opens with a fast, heavy drum break, with violin and synth melodies eventually breaking through a filter. After a minute the beats change completely, with a much slower break taking over temporarily, before the original loop fades back in again, building up to an explosive breakdown. Eventually at the 2-minute mark, the EP version of the track starts, and while the main structure of that piece is present, it's overlaid with the intro's violin, giving the largely minimal piece much more textural and melodic interest. And suddenly it shifts into more amorphous adjacent territory with vibraphone and flute. When the original is preparing to fade out, this version is building up with further synth arpeggios, layers of digital sound and acoustic instrumentation. Eventually, violin disappears into a fog of reverb as the track crossfades with the next piece on the album. Bring is such an oddly underwhelming title for an epic piece like this, a track that moves through several movements and has a huge foreboding atmosphere to it. A massive dramatic track that will be right there at the top of my list of pieces to play to people who aren't aware that the band are still creating music as strong and interesting as their 90s material. To my mind, one of their finest tracks. Triospheres. A couple of fuzzy rock guitar riffs, some live drums, this is surely heading into amorphous territory. Only it's pretty dark and aggressive sounding, and the mix is filled out with layers of synths. Huge chunky analogue sequences bubble up from nowhere, pads shimmer in the background, lone notes pierce through the mix. In the right channel a breakbeat quietly appears from nowhere. It's very difficult to hear Bring without immediately leaping to this afterwards because the two share such a wonderfully dramatic tone, Bring fading so seamlessly into Triospheres that they almost feel like two parts of the same track. This is an issue I have with the otherwise excellent 2023 expanded reissue of Life in Moments, with the tracks separated. It just doesn't feel quite the same. Gaz posted a video on his Facebook of him driving with this track playing, talking about how proud of the piece he is, suggesting it's probably him on guitar. It ends up being a long, long way from amorphous, regardless of how it might read on paper and how it might have begun. A somnambulant drift. More guitar heavy FSOL here, replete with trademark euphoric sadness. The playing is beautiful, a gorgeous descending melody and warm plucked chords, somewhat reminiscent of her face forms in summertime. Bell-like synths and piano accompany the guitar, but before things get too sweet, louder, distorted chords come crashing in to add a little darkness to the piece. Synth strings contrast with the acoustic sounds and bring the track to an emotional climax, before more guitar chords, birdsong and piano notes lead towards the end of this beautiful melancholic piece. Talisman. Talisman continues the guitar and piano driven material on Life in Moments with acoustic chords, piano notes, what sounds like a brief oud improvisation and 70s sounding lo-fi drum machine. The piece rolls along pleasantly, but gradually the pastoral vibe becomes fractured, with synth alarms and increasingly distorted drums creeping up. It isn't too far off the FSOL leaning end of Amorphous, like a more slow-paced Riders on the Circadian Rhythm. Falling Upwards Aria. Another one of the actual crossovers between Amorphous and FSOL, the strings vocal and ever-present rook samples here began live as part of the monstrous psychedelic bubble remix of Oasis's Falling Down. A fitting title then. Alicia Sufit provides ghostly vocals over dramatic strings, acting as the brief coda to the album. It feels like it should be at the end of something a bit longer, and as such it works much better on the more expanded 2023 version of Life in Moments. And that's your lot for 2015. Quite a big year for FSOL, with this in particular an unexpected kind of new album and the first FSOL record to have a standalone title since Dead Cities. Or maybe we have Explosive. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the music. Do leave me a comment down below, or like, share, subscribe. All this really helps with my channel and the video. And I'll be back again very soon, looking at the first half of 2016 with some Alias vinyl releases. I really hope you'll join me then. And then there are 5 pages. Hello. Gradually, a slow